She hired him to fix her porch, but she didn't expect him to stay for dinner or to see the pieces of her heart he was quietly putting back together. This is what happens when two broken souls meet at just the right time. Ryan Carter parked his battered Ford pickup at the end of the long gravel driveway, tires crunching beneath him as he cut the engine. The old porch that stretched along the front of the pale blue house sagged like a tired spine planks, warped and peeling from years of New England weather. It didn't look unsafe, just unloved. He gathered his tools and slid out of the truck, stretching his back before approaching the front door. According to the job sheet, the woman's name was Grace Whitaker, widowed according to the referral. A neighbor had recommended him after he'd fixed up a deck across town. Ryan didn't ask for details. He'd learned long ago that people came with more stories than they let on. He raised his hand to knock, but the door creaked open before he could. "Hi," said the woman. "You must be Ryan." She looked to be in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, with soft auburn hair, pulled into a messy bun and a calm, composed expression that didn't quite hide the weariness in her eyes. She wore a lightweight cardigan over a faded green t-shirt and jeans barefoot on the hardwood floor inside. Her voice was low, confident, but not cold. "That's me," he replied, shifting the toolbox in his hand. "You're Grace, I am. Come on in, or should I show you the porch first?" Ryan smiled faintly. Porch first, then coffee. That got the smallest grin from her, just one side of her mouth tugging up. Deal. They stepped outside and she led him along the edge of the porch, pointing out the loose boards, the handrail that rattled when touched the gap near the steps where the wood had completely splintered. "I've been meaning to fix it for a while," she said, watching his hands as he bent to examine a beam, but other things kept getting in the way. "Life does that," Ryan murmured. "This section needs to be replaced altogether. I'll need to brace the support column underneath. Sorry, I tend to ramble. I don't mind. I like people who know what they're talking about." He nodded, then glanced toward the yard. A girl about 15 or 16 sat on the back steps, earbuds in, watching them through narrowed eyes. She looked nothing like Grace, more angular, with sharp cheekbones and thick dark hair braided down her back. She noticed Ryan noticing her and turned away. "That's my daughter Sophie," Grace said quietly. "She's observant. Don't mind that either." Grace watched him a moment longer, then tilted her head toward the front door. "You still want that coffee?" They sat in the kitchen in a modest space painted sunflower yellow. It was neat but not sterile, lived in. Ryan cradled the mug she'd handed him and let the warmth seep into his calloused hands. "So," she said, folding her arms, "what made you get into fixing things?" He sipped first, stalling. "Not sure. Grew up in and out of places that needed patchwork, group homes, foster homes. If something broke, it didn't always get replaced, so I started learning to fix it." Grace blinked slowly. "You were in the system." "Yeah, since I was 9. A few good placements, a few not. A lot of duct tape." She smiled, but it was a sad one. "I'm sorry. You don't have to be." Ryan shrugged. "It's just part of the story." She stared into her mug, then said softly, "My husband passed, heart failure. We just bought this place. I was supposed to pick out a new color for the porch that week." "I'm sorry too," Ryan said, and he meant it. They drank in silence for a while, broken only by the sound of Sophie shuffling into the kitchen. She opened the fridge, pulled out a soda, and stood frozen when she saw Ryan. "This is the guy fixing the porch?" she asked flatly. "Yes," Grace said. "He looks young. I am young." Ryan offered, raising his hand in a wave. Sophie didn't smile. "Whatever. Just don't leave your junk all over the yard." She walked out again, and Grace let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh. "Teenagers." Ryan grinned. "She reminds me of a girl I used to know. Used to roll her eyes so hard I thought she'd see into the next dimension." Grace laughed now. It was soft and sudden, like it had startled her. He looked down into his coffee. "I'll get started on the porch tomorrow. Should only take me a few days." "All right." She stood and walked him to the door. "Thanks for coming out." He stepped down the porch, carefully mindful of the weak spots. As he reached his truck, she called after him. "Ryan." He turned. The porch light had flickered on, casting her in soft gold. "Why'd you say yes to this job? It's small, doesn't pay much." He shrugged. Something about it felt like the kind of job I shouldn't say no to. She nodded just once, and he drove off into the evening thinking that maybe, just maybe, he'd stepped into something more than wood and nails. The next morning, he was back with lumber brackets and a bag of screws slung over his shoulder. Sophie watched from the window as he unloaded. He pretended not to notice. As he worked, Grace stepped outside and handed him a bottle of water. I was thinking, she said, maybe you could show Sophie how to use a drill. She's always tinkering with stuff in the garage. Might give her something useful. Ryan blinked. You sure she wants to learn from me? No, Grace said dryly, but she might surprise herself. He chuckled. Fair enough. Later that afternoon, Sophie wandered out onto the lawn, arms crossed. Mom said you'd teach me something. Ryan handed her the drill. Ever use one of these? She raised a brow. You think I've never picked up a power tool before? He grinned. All right then, let's see what you got. To his surprise, she handled it well, a little overconfident, but her lines were straight, her grip steady. He nodded. Not bad. You sound surprised. I am. She rolled her eyes. People always are. He didn't say anything, just kept working. After a while, Sophie sat beside him on the steps. My dad built stuff too, she said out of nowhere. He wasn't as good as you, but he tried. Ryan looked at her. Bet he was proud of anything he built with you. She didn't answer, but she didn't leave either. Inside, Grace watched through the window, her hand on the sink, something unreadable in her expression. That night, Ryan packed up, leaving only the shell of the new porch frame behind. As he headed to his truck, Grace came out again. You made progress, she said. So did Sophie. Grace looked down at her bare feet, then back at him. You're good with her. She's got a lot going on up there. Ryan said smart kids need space to be seen. She stepped closer. You see people. Not everyone does. Ryan shrugged. Sometimes I think that's all we're ever looking for, someone to really see us. She held his gaze for a long time, then in a voice quieter than the breeze, she asked, Would you stay for dinner tomorrow night? Ryan hesitated, not because he didn't want to, but because it felt like a step he couldn't undo. I'd like that, he said. Her smile was soft, almost shy. Then I'll cook. He drove off under the setting sun, headlights cutting through the shadows like hope cracking open a door. He didn't know where this road led, but for the first time in a long time, he wanted to follow it. The morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains of Grace's kitchen, casting a warm glow on the worn wooden table. Ryan sat there nursing a cup of coffee, his hands calloused from years of labor, yet gentle as he cradled the mug. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of sawdust that clung to his flannel shirt. Grace entered, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail, wearing a simple blouse and jeans. She offered a soft smile, one that hinted at both gratitude and something more complex. Morning, she greeted, pouring herself a cup. Morning, Ryan replied, his voice low and steady. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that spoke volumes. The previous day's work on the porch had gone smoothly, the structure beginning to take shape under Ryan's skilled hands. But it wasn't just the porch that was being rebuilt. Something intangible was forming between them. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her expression guarded. Can I talk to you, Mom? She asked. Grace nodded, setting her cup down. Of course. They stepped into the living room, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. He stared into his coffee, the dark liquid reflecting a man who had built walls around himself, much like the ones he was now tearing down and reconstructing on the porch. After a few minutes, Grace returned, her expression thoughtful. Everything okay? Ryan inquired. Grace hesitated before responding. She's just protective. It's been just the two of us for a while. Ryan nodded, understanding more than she knew. I get it. They moved outside, the morning air crisp and invigorating. Ryan resumed his work, measuring and cutting each movement precise. Grace watched him for a moment before picking up a paintbrush. Mind if I help? She asked. He looked up, surprised. Not at all. They worked side by side, the rhythm of their labor creating a harmony that words couldn't capture. As they painted and hammered, their conversations flowed naturally, touching on topics both mundane and profound. I used to dream of a porch like this. Grace admitted, a place where I could sit and watch the world go by. Ryan glanced at her, his eyes softening. Dreams have a way of coming true when you least expect them. She smiled, a genuine expression that reached her eyes. Maybe you're right. As the day wore on, Sophie emerged, a tentative look on her face. Need any help? She asked. Grace and Ryan exchanged a glance before Grace responded. Sure, honey, grab a brush. The three of them worked together, the porch transforming not just in structure, but in spirit. Laughter echoed as paint splattered and stories were shared. The barriers that had once stood between them began to crumble, replaced by a budding sense of unity. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues across the sky, they stood back to admire their handiwork. The porch, though not yet complete, stood as a testament to their collective effort. "It's beautiful," Grace whispered. Ryan nodded, his gaze fixed on the structure. "It's more than just wood and nails. It's a new beginning." Grace turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Thank you, Ryan, for everything." He met her gaze, a quiet intensity in his eyes. "I'm just glad to be part of it." In that moment, amidst the scent of fresh paint and the warmth of shared accomplishment, something unspoken passed between them, a promise of possibilities yet to come. The sound of thunder cracked through the sky just as Ryan pulled into Grace's driveway the next morning. Rain drizzled steadily, tapping on his windshield like impatient fingers. He sat for a moment watching the gray clouds roll in thicker lower. It didn't look like porch work was happening today, but a part of him didn't mind. He wasn't just showing up for nails and lumber anymore. He was showing up for them. He knocked gently on the door, toolbox still in hand. Grace opened it, wearing a soft hoodie and yoga pants, her hair pulled back but her smile warm. "You came," she said, eyebrows lifting in surprise. "You told me to be here," he replied, grinning. "You didn't say anything about a rain delay." She stepped aside to let him in. "Well, consider this your official rain check, but there's coffee, and I make a mean banana bread. I'm starting to think I got the better end of this deal." The house felt different today, not physically but emotionally. There was a warmth that hadn't been there when he first walked in with his tape measure. Maybe it was the rain making everything feel closer, or maybe it was the way Grace's voice no longer held that guarded edge. Sophie wasn't downstairs yet, and Ryan didn't ask. He figured teenagers had their own weather systems. He followed Grace into the kitchen, where she slid a plate of banana bread his way and poured 2 mugs of coffee. He sat at the breakfast bar, their elbows almost touching. "Mind if I ask you something?" she said after a quiet minute. "Sure, what brought you here to this town?" Ryan exhaled, watching the steam from his mug curl upward like smoke signals. "Honestly, I needed to reset. Left my old job after a pretty bad year. Lost someone, well, 2 people technically. My dad passed, my fiancée left a month later." Grace blinked, surprised. "I'm sorry, Ryan." He shrugged, but his eyes betrayed the ache. "Everyone always says grief and heartbreak make you stronger, but at the time, all I wanted was to disappear. So I came here. My uncle owns a small construction company. He gave me work, no questions asked." Grace tilted her head. "You look young to have been engaged." "I was young, thought I had everything figured out." She softened. "No one has it figured out." He looked at her, then his blue eyes locking with hers. "What about you? What made you call a stranger to fix your porch?" Grace laughed, almost shyly. "Well, you came highly recommended by my neighbor, so technically you weren't a complete stranger. But truthfully, the porch wasn't the only thing falling apart. It was symbolic, I guess, of how long I let things sit broken. My marriage ended. He wasn't a bad man, just not the right one, and it took me a long time to admit that." Ryan nodded, listening with quiet respect. "I kept telling myself I was holding on for Sophie." Grace went on, her voice softer now, but kids know. They see the cracks. He looked at her, then out the rain-speckled window. "You're doing a good job with her." Grace looked down at her hands. "I'm trying. She still doesn't trust easily, especially with men." There was a beat of silence, then Ryan leaned forward. "Well then, I'll earn it." Grace blinked, caught off guard by his sincerity. But before she could respond, a door creaked upstairs and footsteps echoed down. Sophie entered, still in pajama pants and a hoodie. She gave Ryan a cursory glance, then went straight to the fridge. Grace started to say something, but Ryan spoke first. "Morning, Sophie," he said gently. She looked over, studying him like she wasn't sure whether to trust the smile on his face. "Morning." It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. Ryan took it as progress. The rain outside intensified, drumming on the windows in thick, steady pulses. Grace sighed, setting down her mug. "Well, I guess it's a movie day. Want to join?" Ryan chuckled. "If you're offering banana bread and popcorn, how can I say no?" Sophie rolled her eyes, but again she didn't leave. They settled into the living room, Grace tucking her legs beneath her on the couch, Sophie curling into the opposite corner and Ryan sitting in the armchair. They put on a classic Back to the Future, one of Sophie's favorites. Halfway through, lightning lit up the living room. When a loud thunderclap followed seconds later, Sophie flinched. Grace glanced at her daughter, then at Ryan. "I used to be scared of storms," he said casually. "When I was little, I'd sit in the hallway with my dog and count between the thunder." Sophie glanced at him. "Did it help?" "Not really," he said with a grin, "but at least I didn't feel alone." She cracked a tiny smile. By the time the movie ended, the rain had eased and something else had settled in its place, a quiet trust. Grace walked Ryan to the door. "Thank you," she said softly, "not just for the porch, for this." He smiled. "Thank you for the banana bread." They stood in the doorway for a moment longer than necessary. Grace's hand lingered on the doorframe. Ryan stepped outside and paused on looking back. "Same time tomorrow," Grace nodded. "Same time." Then she closed the door, but her heart stayed open. Inside, Sophie peeked around the corner. "You like him," she said. Grace turned startled. "What?" Sophie smirked. "You smiled like twice." Grace laughed, shaking her head. "Go do your homework." But even as she turned away, her reflection in the window gave her away. There was a smile, soft, uncertain, but it was there. Outside, Ryan walked to his truck, the scent of rain and fresh earth in the air. For the first time in years, he felt something shift, not just hope, but the kind of warmth that could survive a storm. The sun returned the next morning, casting a soft glow across Grace's front porch as Ryan stepped out of his truck. The boards he'd replaced earlier gleamed slightly with dew, fresh, strong, like they belonged. He knocked twice. Grace opened the door, one hand holding her phone, the other holding her smile. She looked different today. Bright-eyed, hair down, wearing a soft green blouse that picked up the color in her eyes. "Morning," she said, ending the call. "You're early." "Couldn't sleep," he replied. She arched a brow. "Bad dreams, more like good ones, I didn't want to end." Her cheeks flushed faintly, but she let it slide. "Coffee's already on. Sophie's at school. You've got me all to yourself." He followed her inside, dropping his tool belt near the porch. "Don't tempt me." Grace gave him a mock glare as she poured him a cup. "The porch is almost finished." Ryan nodded. "Yeah, a few more planks, some railing, maybe a coat of stain, if you're feeling fancy." She smiled softly. "Let's take our time." He looked at her, then not as a client or a mother or even a woman rebuilding her life, but just as her. As they worked side by side, the conversation ebbed and flowed, like it had always existed, like it hadn't taken months of loneliness and years of wounds to get here. At one point, Grace sat on the porch step beside him, sipping her coffee while he sanded down a rough corner. She was quiet, too quiet. "What's on your mind?" he asked. Grace stared ahead, out at the sleepy street. "There's a man coming back into town. Sophie's father." Ryan's hand stilled. "Oh, he visits once, maybe twice a year. Says all the right things, promises stuff, and then—" She sighed. "Then he leaves." "Does Sophie know?" "She doesn't want to see him, but she'll pretend she does. She always does." Ryan sat beside her. The wood was warm under them. The silence stretched between them again, but this time it was heavier. "I'm not trying to fix you," he said gently, "or your life. I just want to be someone who stays." Grace looked at him, her eyes shimmering like she was trying not to let something fall apart. "Why?" she asked. "Because I see you, all of you, and I think maybe I've been waiting to." She blinked. "You don't even know everything." "Then tell me." She hesitated, then quietly. "There's a part of me that's angry all the time. Angry at how much I let myself disappear for him, at how much of Sophie's childhood I spent just trying to survive a marriage that looked fine from the outside." "You didn't disappear," Ryan said. "You're right here." A tear finally escaped. She wiped it quickly as if embarrassed. "You don't have to hold it together with me," he added. She laughed, a tired, broken sound. "Don't say things like that." "Why not? Because you're young and I'm not." Ryan smiled, soft and sure. "You think I don't know that?" Grace's eyes met his, sharp with emotion. "You think I don't notice how you make Sophie breakfast when you come early? Or how you wait until I go inside to pack up your tools so I don't have to watch you leave?" He was quiet now. I see you too, Ryan, she whispered, and that scares me. He reached over gently, taking her hand. Her fingers trembled in his. I'm not asking for anything right now, he said, except this, don't push me away just because I make you feel something. Grace squeezed his hand. I won't, she said, but you need to know it's complicated. I'm not afraid of complicated. Just then, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway snapped the moment in half. They both stood. Grace squinted toward the window, her entire face shifting, not fear exactly, but tension. A tall man stepped out of a sleek black car, sunglasses on, carrying a gift bag. Ryan recognized the type, immediately. Expensive shoes, empty charm. Guess who's early, Grace muttered under her breath. She turned to Ryan, about to say something, but the doorbell rang. I'll go, she said quietly. Ryan stood back as she opened the door. Seth, she said, her voice neutral. You're not supposed to be here yet. The man grinned. Got a free weekend, thought I'd surprise Soph. Grace stepped out onto the porch, trying to block his view inside. Ryan couldn't help but notice her shoulders tense. She's at school. Seth finally noticed Ryan. And who's this? He asked too casually. Grace opened her mouth, but Ryan answered first. I'm Ryan. I'm fixing the porch. Seth looked around, unimpressed. Great work. Really sturdy. You get that from YouTube? Ryan smiled coolly. Nah, I learned it from my dad. I built homes for a living. Grace stepped between them. Seth, this isn't the time. I'll be around, he said, eyes still locked on Ryan. Tell Soph I'll call. He left with a wink, like he owned the air around him. The silence after the door closed felt heavy. I'm sorry, Grace said, turning to Ryan. Don't be, he replied. She stepped forward. This is the part where most guys run. I'm not most guys. She stared at him for a moment, then reached out, just barely tucking a stray piece of sawdust from his shirt. Tomorrow, she said softly. If you're still coming, I will. As he left, Ryan's heart wasn't confused, it was clear. He wasn't just fixing a porch. He was rebuilding trust, one moment at a time. The sky was pale gray by the time Ryan pulled up in front of Grace's house the next morning. The porch was nearly finished, just one final coat of sealant, a few rails, and it would be complete. But that wasn't what brought him here. He rang the doorbell. Grace answered quickly, almost like she'd been waiting. Hey, she said, brushing a loose curl behind her ear. She looked tired but beautiful in that unguarded, real way, a soft sweatshirt, bare face, eyes that had seen more than they should have had to. Hey, he replied. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped aside and let him in. Coffee, she asked. Sure. They didn't talk about the porch, or Seth, or even Sophie, who was still at school. Grace poured 2 mugs, handed him one, then sat at the kitchen table with her hands wrapped around hers. I didn't sleep much, she said. Me neither. I kept thinking about how easy it would be to go back to what's familiar, to not let anything change, to pretend like none of this. She motioned between them happened. But it did, Ryan said. She met his eyes, steady now. I know. Silence fell again, but this time it wasn't fear holding it, it was clarity. I was young when I married Seth, she began. He was charming, ambitious, said all the right things. But once we moved here, once Sophie came, the promises stopped, the warmth stopped. I became the person who did everything while he did nothing but criticize how I did it. Ryan didn't interrupt. One time when Sophie was 6, I had the flu. I was in bed, shivering, trying to rest, and he came in just to tell me I was being dramatic, that I should pull myself together. Ryan's jaw clenched. I used to think love meant staying. Now I think it means being chosen every day, always by me, even when it's messy. He reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. I choose you, he said. I have for weeks now. Grace's eyes welled up. She didn't cry, but something inside her unlocked. She leaned across the table and kissed him, soft and slow. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was the kind of kiss that said, I've been waiting for this, and now that it's here, I won't waste it. When they finally pulled apart, she laughed quietly. I can't believe I kissed my handyman. I'm not just your handyman, he said. Oh, I'm also pretty great with window repairs, he grinned. She rolled her eyes, but the tension was gone. Something new filled the room, peace. That afternoon, Sophie came home from school. Ryan was still there, sitting on the couch, flipping through a catalog of porch furniture. Grace was in the kitchen, humming under her breath. Sophie paused in the doorway, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "You're still here," she said to Ryan. He stood. "Yeah." She looked at him carefully. "Are you staying?" Grace turned from the kitchen and waited for Ryan to answer. He didn't hesitate. "If that's okay with you." Sophie looked at her mom, then back at him. "You make her smile, like real smile." "I like seeing her happy," she said. Ryan nodded. Sophie shrugged. "Then I guess it's okay." And just like that, a door opened where none had existed before. Later that evening, Ryan helped Grace install the last piece of railing on the porch. They stood back to admire their work side by side, fingers brushing sun beginning to set. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He looked at her. "So are you." She glanced at him, half shy. "You rebuilt more than this porch, you know." "I know," he said, "but maybe you rebuilt me too." She turned to him fully. "Would you like to stay for dinner?" He smiled. "Only if I get to cook." She laughed free and full this time and opened the screen door. "I've got garlic bread. Think you can handle it? I can handle more than you think." And as he stepped inside the porch behind them, wasn't just a porch anymore. It was a threshold one they had crossed. The story of Ryan and Grace offers a heartfelt lesson. Healing begins when we choose to see and stay for one another, even through life's cracks. Ryan, a handyman, with his own scars from loss, didn't just repair Grace's sagging porch. He helped mend her and Sophie's wounded trust. Grace, carrying the weight of a broken marriage, found courage in Ryan's quiet presence, while Sophie, guarded yet yearning for connection, learned to open up. Their shared moments, building, laughing, weathering storms, show that love and trust are rebuilt through small, steady acts of care. This resonates deeply in a world where we often shy away from others' pain or our own. Ryan's choice to stay despite complications reminds us that true connection requires vulnerability and patience. It's a call to notice the broken porches in others' lives and offer our time not to fix but to build together. Grace's smile, Sophie's acceptance, and Ryan's hope prove that new beginnings are possible when we choose presence over absence. Have you ever had someone stay through your storms or been that person for another? Share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. If this touched you, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to join our community of storytellers. Let's keep inspiring each other to rebuild one moment at a time.